If you're confused as to why agriculture is such a big problem that can lead to war, yet so fundamental at the same time, stay until the end and not only will you understand this gigantic issue a bit better, but you'll also leave with some inspiring ideas and information to start envisioning a better food and ecosystem.
If you don't have healthy soils, indirectly you're impacting food quality for the plant, for the animal, and for the human. So I think that's something that the audience needs to understand.
How do you get the food you put into your body? Today we're talking about agriculture. It's the basis of our civilization and it's at the intersection of many aspects of our ecosystem and our human lives. So if we do agriculture wrong, we really do everything wrong. Historically, famines and agricultural issues have contributed to all kinds of conflicts, like the emergence of wars and even the extinction of civilizations. And right now, we're not doing great in terms of agriculture. The good news is, if we get better at that, we get better at everything else too. That's actually what drove me to study agronomy, because it's really all-encompassing and impactful on so many levels, starting with food security. So let's talk to agronomist and soil health expert Ray Archuleta, who teaches farmers not only how to work, but also take care of the land, to understand what we're doing wrong and how we can improve to make sure that agriculture doesn't take away from people's safety and freedom, but actually enhances it. Funny story, he's actually the reason why I studied agronomy. I saw him in the documentary Kiss the Ground, and I paused it after like 30 minutes to Google how to become an agronomist, because I thought, this guy has the most important kind of impact I can think of. Okay, let's dive in, but first, some important information for new listeners. Feel free to skip about a minute if you've heard it before. Do you ever feel like every important conversation turns into just another petty debate and that we deserve better? Well, welcome to Make Sense, the show where I, singer-songwriter Leïla Six, interview people with super relevant and important insight to put our ideologies aside and make the most efficient decisions to build societies that actually make sense based on our shared values. I believe these are freedom and safety, which for humans comes from community. And by the way, whether you look at it scientifically or spiritually, community includes the entire planet. But these values can sometimes be a bit conflicting, which is tricky. So how can we shape a world that's both safe and exciting for everyone and on the largest scale possible? Well, that's a tough question and an ambitious goal, and it would be easy to get cynical about it and just say, well, the world's unfair, so I'll fight for my share and F the rest. But I don't want to do that, and I'm sure you don't either. So we need to understand topics that are fundamental to how the world works, complex topics that require our attention if we want to stay true to our values. Now, I tell all of my guests that I only want to have constructive, snark-free conversations here because I want everyone to feel welcome to learn, feel, and grow. So I'll ask the same of you in the comment section. Now, all that's been said, let's use our senses to make sense of the world and create more sensible societies. I know, it's too much wordplay, but I had to.
Let my breath brush your ears. Inhale these words. May they fill your lungs and the atmosphere.
Agriculture has an impact on so many parts and aspects of the ecosystem. So I'm going to throw Ray a few of its most common practices and he'll tell us what they are and why they're really bad. It's going to get a bit technical, but don't try to absorb everything. My goal here is not to overwhelm you, but to help us understand what we mean when we talk about the negative impacts of agriculture. Okay, so the first one is tillage. What is it used for and how is it harmful?
Tillage has been used for thousands of years to be able to break up the existing grasses that were in either in forest land or grasslands. You need to realize a majority of our farms come from those ecosystems, and tillage was used for that, and also tillage is used for weed control now. Organic farms don't use chemistry, they use it for weed control. They use light, the scratching of the tillage on the surface. And tillage is a very intrusive tool. It's understandable how it was used in the past, but many farmers don't understand that the soil's alive. Like 99% of the farmers don't realize it's alive. Even some of the agronomists kind of look at it as a growing medium. So what's the negative impact of tillage? Well, negative impact of tillage is tillage infuses more oxygen and it destroys the aggregate stability, and then it wakes up bacteria, starts to cannibalize itself. So the soil starts to cannibalize itself. By what I mean by that is it starts eating the biotic glues and all the cementing agents, and it ends up destroying porosity and also enhances more weeds. So tillage is a very intrusive tool. I'm not saying people don't do tillage. I'm saying to be very careful with tillage. Tillage, now we know the science behind it. It's you have to be very careful with it, especially as the soils becomes more and more degraded, and the more you use chemical fertilizer and the less you do cover crops, the more destructive tillage is. So, and also, please keep in mind, the drier the land is, the less rain you get, the more harmful tillage is.
Then chemical fertilizers.
Chemical fertilizers are another tool that modern agriculture uses. They're salt based. The part that makes chemical fertilizers harmful is when you substitute cover crops and good practices, but you only use chemical fertilizer. Again, chemical fertilizer is a salt. So if you're using chemical fertilizer and you're not using cover crops and you're not reducing tillage, you're putting nitrogen fertilizer, and see, when you have free nitrogen in the soil, the microorganisms will utilize the nitrogen to eat the carbon molecules and the aggregate stability, because aggregates are created in the soil by microflora, by fungus and bacteria. So the audience is probably going to say, well, what is an aggregate? So most people, let's make that very clear so people understand what an aggregate is. If you grab a shovel full of soil and you look under the roots, you see these tiny little marbles. And these little marbles are carbon-based molecules. So those are aggregates. They're like little marbles. It allows water to infiltrate very quickly. But those superbiotic glues don't last very long. These pore spaces, these aggregates, these super substances don't last long in the soil. You're always being consumed by microorganisms, but you're always building it. So applying too much chemical fertilizer and not using good rotations and not using long fibrous root systems in the system can diminish aggregates. And that's why we have so much runoff throughout the globe. We don't have enough living plants and we don't have enough aggregated soil. So when the water rains, when it rains, the water just runs off and it ends up in the river and lake, which is ultimately changing the climate. Who would have thought that if you can't get the water in the soil, and it's a problem. That's why I tell people when I teach all over the world, we don't have a runoff problem. We have an infiltration problem. Water doesn't enter in the ground. So I think we have to make that very clear, and I think most people don't understand that.
Yeah, definitely. And also the implications for acidifying the soils and the waters.
Yeah, good point. I forgot the acidification and you brought it up, and that's very important. So how does that work? Well, this hydrogen base like ammonium nitrate sends off a free hydrogen in the soil, and it knocks calcium off the exchange, which acidifies the soil, which is a problem. And so you acidify the soil. In ancient times, if you wanted to get rid of your enemies, you would salt the soil so it would never grow anything again. So yes, so we're continually salting the soil, lowering the pH, but also we're destroying aggregate stability. So and then if you don't have healthy soils and you're using this as a tool all the time, and that you're going to hurt the fungi and the bacteria, and you're altering the soil food web. And so I think indirectly what you're doing is, as the soil becomes more and more diminished and the biology is not present, you're hurting it. Well, guess what's happening? Now we're going to hurt nutrient density for the animals and the plants for food. So indirectly you're impacting food quality for the plant, for the animal, and for the human. So I think that's something that the audience needs to understand.
And it's not just food quality, it's also food availability. Because plants are the source of all of our food. Even the animals you eat grow up eating plants. So it really comes down to plants. And they need healthy soil to grow. They need little creatures to move around in the soil, making small tunnels so their roots can grow and reach the oxygen, water, and minerals metabolized by other little creatures. And we need that too, because if the plants can't grow, there's no food for us. That's called scarcity, and I think nobody wants that. Now let's go back to Ray, and the next item on the list is pesticides and herbicides.
those are other tools that also could be very intrusive. And it's a function of their toxicity and how frequent you use them. If you're a regenerative farmer and you know the soil's alive, you're going to be careful with pesticides, fungicides, and insecticides and tillage. You're going to be very, very cautious. And that's what I love about regenerative agriculture is it's that farmers are cognizant, they're aware, they become very close stewards, they're very cautious how many of they use. If you use an occasional tillage, the soil can handle it. I call it an acute stress. If you use an occasional fungicide, the soil can handle it, this ecosystem can handle it. And if you use an occasional insecticide, it's acute, not chronic. The issue in agriculture is always using them, too much tillage, too much fungicides, too much insecticide. It's too much. And so I'm not a supporter of the chemical companies. I don't want the audience to misunderstand. I'm not a supporter, but we also have to be very careful. We're helping farmers getting away from these tools because they're expensive. They use huge amounts of energy to create them. Third, some of them are toxic, and it's hurting farmers. They're getting they may be getting some early signs of dementia and other disease, and the farmers don't go out and say, "Oh, I want to use them." They don't want to use them. They don't want to pay for them. But think about who's going to do all the weed control. And when you're farming thousands of hectares, you gotta be cognizant. But fungicides are hard on the soil. They hurt our mycorrhizae fungi. They hurt the saprophytic fungi, which are nutrient cycling. So, and then chemicals like Roundup and Dome the literature is toxic. It can be toxic. And so you have to use it very carefully. And I just want to make this quick statement. If we use these tools, notice how I use the word tools, cautiously, we probably wouldn't have some of these problems we have nowadays. But we're not. We're using them very foolishly, and it gets in the water, it gets in our blood, it gets in our health, it's ubiquitous in the rain. That's the problem, is the chronic use of these tools.
Another practice that I wanted to mention is monoculture. Why does that even exist? Like, how did it come to be, and how is it harmful for our ecosystem?
It's a very good question and a very insightful question, because I think that's another issue that we have is we do monoculture because we want to harvest one thing. We either want to do corn, we want to do soybean. This is how we make money. This is how our infrastructure is made. That's how farmers get paid. Is it destructive? Absolutely, it's destructive. It leads to a lot more prone to disease. And if you grow the wrong monoculture, like monoculture cotton, is really hard on the soil. One taproot, it does not feed the soil. Soybean, very hard on the soil because it's got a really poor root system, leaks nitrogenous compounds. It does not feed enough carbon to the soil. It becomes a problem. If you keep growing the same crop over and over, you're going to have more disease. It doesn't feed the ecosystem. It doesn't feed all the beneficial insects. It hurts the wildlife. It hurts the insects. It hurts the diversity of life. And I think we need to make the audience understand the planet runs on diversity. So regenerative agriculture teaches how to mimic the patterns and the structure of the prairie and the forest. There's hundreds of species in every square square mile, kilometer, or mile in forest and prairies.
We didn't mention it, but this is not a vegetable issue. Sure, we are talking about crops, but because the vast majority of crop production is used to feed cattle, this is absolutely about meat and dairy production too. Okay, that was a lot of information, so let's take a breather with a snippet of a song about how we're destroying our ecosystem. Fun! It's called Mother, and if you want to hear the rest of the song, you can stay until the end of this episode or find it on any music platform for better sound quality.
It was no accident. I saw it coming. I was never a saint, but now I am an assassin.
So one of the main issues with agriculture and the way we're doing agriculture currently and the way we've been doing it for a few decades now is its damage to the soil and as it contributes to erosion and desertification. So can you explain a bit what that is and why that's such a big deal?
Yeah, I think once we're honest to ourselves, the biggest healer for our planet is agriculture. It has the largest footprint. It has the largest footprint. More than our vehicles and other things. It's really important to understand that when we leave the ground bare, what's happening is we're reflecting light energy called latent and sensible heat, and so that soil surface heats up and it pushes clouds, rain clouds away. 40% of our rain comes from the terrestrial system, living plants. Plants draw in rain, trees, vegetation. 60% comes from the ocean. So the more bare ground you leave, the more it impacts it. Let's give you a perspective in our country. Do you know that more than a great percentage of our land is bare during the winter? We could be growing a green cover crop, a green winter cover crop, and it could be green. So October, November, December, January, February, March, all the way into April is bare ground. So when it rains and we get snow, we get erosion. And then the drier regions as we go out west, California and that, leaving the ground bare, our country used to be grasslands. Half of the United States was grasslands. We knew that by the Spaniards when they conquered California, New Mexico, and the largest parts of all that at that time in the 1500s. It was grassland. Now it's desert because there's no more vegetation and it's pushing the rain clouds away. So think about it, 50% of our area in our country is reflecting heat, not capturing, it's not drying rain. So yes, we're having desertification and massive desertification in the United States. In fact, desertification is moving east beyond the meridian line where they call it 30th meridian. I think that's what it is, and it's it's becoming more desert and it's changing our local climate, and it's getting drier and drier. Either we get a lot of rain at one time. It's not steady anymore. It's either lots of rain or very dry. Right now in my farm here in Missouri, we haven't had rain in 2 months, almost nearly 2 months, very little. So it's an issue, but that's a global issue too. So when you affect the small water cycle, you affect the large water cycle on a global scale. That's the issue in my mind. And if your audience wants to find out more, they should go on YouTube and listen to Walter Yenning. Walter Yenning. He does a really good job explaining these cycles.
Mm-hmm. And one thing I found fascinating when I was studying agronomy is the fact that it's really a vicious cycle, because if the ground is bare and it starts to erode, then it will be, and because of climate change, the rains are the same volume, but just the pattern is different, and so it can rain the same during the year, but it's going to be more concentrated, and so heavy rain on a bare ground is actually going to create, I'm not sure what the term in English is for that, but a layer of hard ground, which will then make it even less likely for the rain to infiltrate the soil and for plants and the soil life to grow and to breathe and all of that. So it's really a vicious cycle. So yeah.
The term in the dry area is called solarization. You create this crust, and it creates it, and it doesn't penetrate. But just a regular crust is what your whole point is, and it just runs off more, and you get more erosion, no infiltration, and it's
more
good
floods.
to bring it up. Yeah, and more floods. And so I think people need to understand the difference between acute stress or chronic stress. If you eat bad food one time, that's an acute stress on your body. Chronic stress, you keep eating poorly and you go to fast food and you eat horribly, that's chronic stress. So same thing with tillage or leaving the soil chronically bare. So the whole point is how we use these tools or practices, it can make a huge difference how we can help the planet and help the human health.
That's actually what I wanted to talk about next, because we're talking right now about the ecosystem, and we humans are part of the ecosystem, which is something a lot of people seem to forget about, or at least not conceptualize fully.
Connect, yeah.
So these practices make our habitat less optimal for us in a way, but they also impact us directly. And I was actually thinking about public health. So you alluded to it earlier, but can you tell us a little bit, like, for example, pesticides and herbicides, how they impact farmers' health? Or you also alluded to the impoverishment of the soil, which leads to nutrient-poor food for everyone. So yeah, can you tell us a bit about what you think about all this?
Good question. Let's start off with the deprivation of the soil. How the soil is so degraded with nutrients, and our immune system, even the complexity of our bodies need trace minerals. They need those minerals. Our immune system, everything we do, our health needs those, and they starts with the soil. So if the soil is completely diminished and so who brings the nutrients out of the rock? It's the fungi, the bacteria, the living organisms. They do that in conjunction with the plants. So if you have a system that's already degraded and diminished, then what happens is the plant does not pick up the nutrients and the animal doesn't pick up the nutrients that we eat. So the plant that we eat and the animals that we eat don't have the nutrition, then we are nutrition deficient. So that it's very connected, like the way you said it elegantly a while ago. All these things are connected. Don't separate them out. One of the things I teach farmers and agronomists, all is connected, all is one. Don't separate things in silos. So then how does like Roundup or some of these herbicides, when you spray them and they leak and they go into the body of the plant, they leak it down into the rhizosphere. Some of these can actually tie up nutrients, and that's how the mode of action of killing some of these plants. And so it can be a problem. And so we have the toxicity issues of the herbicides and the fungicides, and then sometimes they inhibit some nutrients, and then we use more chemical fertilizer, so we destroy the carbon in the soil and we change the pH, so we change the soil food web profile and make it more bacteria dominant. We don't want bacteria dominant soils. We want more fungi in the system. So tillage destroys that, fungicides destroy that, leaving the ground bare destroys fungi. All these hurt them. And let's make sure the audience understand they're the ones that help carry nutrients back to the plant. That's one mechanism. And the other one is through diffusion. So it's a cascading effect of many things going on that's affecting human health. And that's why we have issues. And then the food that we have in the United States, it's high on carbohydrates, high on sugars. I love eating food in Europe. And so, yeah.
To be fair, my questions about food quality and farmers' health absolutely applies to Europe as well, and I'm sure to Asia and like any continent you can think of, because I mean, even if we do have better regulations, like food regulations here, I think in the end, these agricultural practices still take away most of the nutrients from the soil and consequently from the food we eat. So a huge, I mean, that's not directly related, but a huge suicide rate among farmers, which is more related with the financial aspect of agriculture, but they also have the highest rate of different kinds of cancers, which are known to be linked to the specific products that they use. So yeah, that's a very universal thing in the Western lifestyle. Now, a musical reminder that what we inflict on our ecosystem, we inflict on ourselves. Again, just a snippet, but you can listen to the full song at the end of the episode or on your favorite music platform. Song's called Ocean of Your Tears.
Birds go silent, nervously fly east. We hide our moment, but then unleash kept alarm. We bathe in the ocean of your tears, and the waves growing in. The salt has crystallized our fears, and we know we had it coming.
Look, there's even socioeconomic/geopolitical aspects to agriculture because, first of all, many crops are stock market commodities like rice, wheat, corn, soybeans, and even cattle. Secondly, the use of nitrogen implies a huge dependency on fossil fuels and complicated countries like Russia, for example, something we might want to think about. Third, when the soil and water cycle aren't functioning properly, farmers use products to balance that, products that they buy. So the price of your food reflects that extra spending. Basically, in this chemical system, the more chemicals you use, the more chemicals you'll need. And that just makes prices go up for us, food eaters. I'm oversimplifying it a bit here, but you get the idea. And I don't think we hear politicians address this, but this is a major risk for people's purchasing power. And fourth, the problem of access to land. Just to illustrate this, one of my internships when I was studying agronomy was with a farmer who did soil conservation agriculture, which aims to protect the integrity of the soil. So great. He was preparing for retirement, but he was struggling to find a buyer who would keep similar practices because those who want to do that don't tend to have the budget for large pieces of land and equipment like this. And those who do have the budget are usually big foreign corporations that buy up a bunch of land and only hire a few people to manage it in a hugely mechanized and chemical way. So because farms have gotten so big, most regular people can't afford farm life. So agriculture definitely goes beyond what happens on the field and has massive political ramifications. Okay, we've exposed the mess. Now come back for part 2 for some solutions to these problems and some movie recommendations. Here's a snippet.
If you would ask me 40 years ago, I had no hope for agriculture, none. Farmers were going broke and the water was still polluted. Now I have hope. I have hope for the future for young people.
In the meantime, you can get extra information and listen to the songs you heard today at the end of the episode or on any music platform for better sound quality. And you can find Ray on his website, raythesoilguy.life. I hope you got some valuable insights from this episode, and if you want to learn more from my guests, you'll find everything you need in the show notes. I, for one, thank you for your attention. I know you could have been watching or listening to a billion other things, and I'm glad you picked this one. Now, 3 things before I leave you. Number 1, if you liked the music you heard today, you should look me up on the music platform you use. There will also be a link in the show notes to help you find me on there. Number 2, if you want to help me make the internet a place for more constructive and nuanced conversations, you can subscribe, like the episode, share it, and leave a comment or review depending on where you're listening to this. And number 3, you can also subscribe to my free Patreon, to my free newsletter Night Sky, and follow me on Instagram or TikTok to understand a bit better the messages behind my songs. Again, everything will be in the show notes. All right, thank you, and take care, and keep trying to make sense.
You're lying on the ground. There's no one everywhere. The world is out of sound, and I'm out of it. I'm so sorry for all that. I didn't know I was capable of such violence, but I am. I think I'm not all stable. Put a knife in your chest, and now you're getting colder. It's time for you to rest. And I just killed my mother. And it's no accident. I saw it coming. I was never a saint, but now I am an assassin. I'm sorry for what I did. I need you for my survival. I never thought I would do this. I think I'm not all irrational. hard to road, flooded to flood, dried after dry. We ruin or something borrowed now. Did we do you proud? We bathe in the ocean of your tears, and the waves keep growing. The salt has crystallized our fears, and we know we had it coming. Birds go silent, nervously flies. We had a moment, but then unleashed the beast. The soil turns to dirt, the air is smog. We never wished for all this hurt. Was such a tragic epilogue.